the glass is there. And I can't get rid of that right in the middle of my thing. Like anyway, so the uh, uh, the fact that humans sometimes being so much brighter theoretically and being able to pick up cues and markers walking into class, it shouldn't surprise us that in fact birds have that problem. And so the issue of birds flying into windows is something that has gotten, as I mentioned just recently, a lot of attention, and it was really given a boost in through an article that came out about, you can see, back in 2014, and it was the first effort to really try to quantify the extent of the impact. And what they found was that hundreds of millions of birds in North America fly into windows every year, and they range anywhere from 365 to 988 million birds. A median is 600 million are killed annually by building collisions in the United States. The surprise there is that, and in fact, when I first started really researching this issue and getting involved in trying to do, policy formulation with government, elected officials, is that I thought that the impact must be the high rises, the skyscrapers of Manhattan that the birds are flying into causing the problems. That's absolutely not the case. And in fact, high rises constitute a very small fraction of the problem. It is almost entirely your house, my house, and 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, maybe 5-story commercial office buildings clad in this new, glass skin that they have. That's where the real problem is. And so you can see that it just, again, trying to pull out of that paper that talks about the percentages. It's really, again, it's the low-rise buildings in our homes that constitute the problem. And so if you figure out from and that's a North American perspective, well, what does that mean for New York State? Being parochial, what is it? We all live in New York. What does that mean for birds in New York State? Well, it means that if you accept those numbers, that between 1 million to 2.7 million birds die in the United States each day, means that for New York, if you do certain assumptions with population and size, that between 50,000 to 135,000 birds die in New York State each and every day by flying into windows. Pretty devastating impact. And it's not a surprise then that you may remember that famous 2019 report that came out by Cornell Lab of Ornithology and some others that documented, if you remember, a 2.9 billion bird decline in North America over the past couple of decades. 2.9 billion less birds today than it was just a couple of decades ago. And that's because of a lot of different factors: habitat destruction, a bit with pesticides. Some birds are affected by flying into, again, wind turbines. They contribute. But the two primary causes by far of bird mortality are cats, both feral and free-ranging home cats or pet cats, and building collisions. And so I wanted to focus on that issue with you tonight. And the good news is talk about what you can do. If you just look at that photograph in the middle, that's what a bird sees. They're flying along. They may be in a tree, landscape tree outside an office park, and they look at those trees in a distance and say, well, there's some habitat there. I want to fly over, probably to go try to secure some food, and boom, at 25, 30 miles an hour with their head, they slam into that glass. For many, that's, of course, a fatal act. The photo you see down in the lower left, which shows that imprint, that's fascinating in that it shows what are the traits that birds have. is this called feather down or powder down. A lot of birds have feathers that intentionally degenerate, break down, almost to create like a talcum powder like substance that the birds use to preen to try to maintain their waterproofing. And so when a lot of birds, when they fly, unfortunately head first very fast into a window, they leave that powder down impression. So that's what you're seeing. Then the lower right, you're seeing that was one night of birds from volunteers walking around the city of Toronto during spring migration. That's what they found just in one night. It's really, again, can be very, very devastating. Let me make it clear to you that this is not just a problem in North America, but in fact is a problem that is throughout the world in the more developed portions of Asia and Africa and Europe. And in fact, I've got to know what one of the sales representatives from a company that produces an exterior window film that's quite effective at preventing bird collisions. And he was telling me he'd come back from a trip to South Korea, where he was dealing with the South Korean government trying to deal with window bird strikes. That particular area, they put up a lot of glass walls along the roads as sound barriers, like we have on Long Island, and the birds were flying routinely into those glass, transparent barriers, and so he was hired to try to put up again this exterior window film to make the glass much more visible to birds. So you can see, here's the thing again, nearly 3 billion birds since 1970. And one of the top contributing factors is window and building collisions. And just to put this in perspective, you can see again, cats are really top, windows are quite significant, and a lot of other issues that get attention, like again, like a lot of people focus on birds flying into wind turbines or into power lines, and certainly birds do die from those sources, but in terms of overall scale and magnitude, they're really minuscule compared to again, cats and windows and birds. So what are the species that are affected? Well, for Long Island, for New York, there's really kind of the top 10 or top 12 species that I've tried to show them here. Most of them overwhelmingly are migratory songbirds, different species of warblers and thrushes. Woodcock we're not quite sure why, but woodcock, American wood, that wonderful shorebird that is right now calling around Long Island with their nuptial flights in the spring, they do fairly regularly fly into windows too. So it's interesting to note of the species that are affected. We don't really have a clear understanding at a species level what the impacts are, and what the frequency or occurrence of collisions are for species. What's kind of interesting, or maybe just weird, is that you can see the pictures of again, a common yellow throat with the black mask and ovenbird, and black and white warblers. So a few warbler species here, and they are routinely routine window strike victims. But there's other warblers that very rarely, or if ever, been reported, like prothonotary warblers. I've never heard of a report of a prothonotary flying into a window, and so it's not quite sure what it is about their migration, but they don't seem to really suffer from this problem, which is good. I do want to stress to you that it's really the migratory birds that take it on the chin more than resident birds, and it's really during spring and fall migration then when the issue's at its greatest peak and greatest problem. And of course, we're coming into spring migration now, so we have to be concerned and diligent about that. And the reason why we think that it's really the migratory birds rather than the resident birds is that resident birds like blue jays or Carolina wrens that are in their territories all year round, they really do learn all the characteristics of the territory that they call home. they're familiar with all the houses and the windows and the overhangs and the angles of the house and things like that. That a migratory bird, an ovenbird coming up from Central or South America is just not going to be aware of. So this really has been more of a problem of migratory songbirds and other migratory birds. There are several hundred species that have been affected by window collisions. I don't know the exact number. I think it's something like 230 species in North America have been documented as window strike victims. So it is pretty widespread. But again, in terms of the abundance or the numbers, the most common victims, it's these 12. Oh, I'm frozen. Oh, there we go. Not all window strike victims die, which is good news. Although even if they don't die outright, some do die afterwards. They're compromised and are predated by something else, or they may just be like this kinglet in the upper left will be affected by a brain hemorrhage, and then when it didn't succumb immediately, will die hours later. The primary cause is not like a broken neck. It is really a hemorrhage of the brain. Again, think about a bird or you or I running into a concrete wall at 20, 30 miles an hour. It's going to be pretty impactful. Remarkably, some birds don't die and survive. And I was mentioning to Gwen at the beginning that been very active in Four Harbors Audubon to try to make the South Campus at Stony Brook University much more bird friendly. I'll show you pictures in a second of the campus. It's a real problem place. Again, one-story buildings, really highly reflective glass. The birds don't see the windows for what they are. And we're putting up stickers, and I came across this bird in the lower left-hand corner, which is a female common yellowthroat. She was a victim of a window strike. She was kind of rocking back and forth and really quite compromised. And so there was a cardboard box nearby. I put the cardboard box over her to protect her, prevent her from a cat or something, or a crow attacking her. And I came back an hour later after he finished putting up stickers, and you can see how alert she is. And she immediately flew off, so she was fine. So there can be some success with regard to birds that do fly into windows. So what is the problem with windows? Well, the windows have two fundamental characteristics that are problematic for birds. And the title of this lecture is, again, Reflections on a Transparent Problem. It was my cute attempt to try to capture both those characteristics. One is, of course, many windows are highly reflective, reflecting the ambient environment that's just outside those windows. And if those windows, that environment is vegetated, landscaped with shrubs and trees, that's what the birds see. So that's one major issue is the reflectivity. And so if we're going to be successful in trying to reduce window bird strikes, we have to break up that reflectivity. We have to create what scientists call visual interference for the birds, which can be achieved in many different ways. And we'll go get into a few of those tonight. The other component of windows is that depending on the angle to the sun, the windows appear entirely transparent. So the bird just doesn't see the glass at all, and like that bus shelter will just try to fly through that area and of course slam into the glass. Or the patio in the upper left, or that house in the lower right is a house that is in Costa Rica, several story house. I just shudder to think about the window bird strikes at that house. That's all glass that enclosed this large atrium that's got all the vegetation inside it that birds see and will try to fly to it and I'm sure die routinely. Again, so there's good news about this. While the issue is a very significant magnitude, there's a bunch of kind of technology that's been developed to try to deal with the issue. And that's through this concept called bird safe building design, or bird friendly building design. If you're interested in learning more about this, I would go into the American Bird Conservancy's manual, which you see here, and you can learn a great deal of the more specific details about the issue. But basically, what you want to do is the first 40 feet from the ground on up, which is the area that's going to reflect the trees and the shrubs, where it's most likely the birds are going to be. You want to try to reduce again the problem if it's either transparency or reflectivity. That exposed facade, you want to again create the visual interference. What's fascinating, how do you figure out about how birds respond to the different products, to try to come up with a whole series of available products that people could effectively put on windows, either at their home or at office buildings? Well, the American Bird Conservancy has been playing the leading role on testing products. And basically what they do is they'll take a bird, and this is actually Dr. Christine Shepard in the upper left-hand corner, who's going to be putting a bird into this long wooden tunnel you see in the upper right-hand picture. At the end of that wooden tunnel are two windows, one of which is clear glass, and the other is got the product that they're testing. And they then document the frequency which the bird flies towards the clear glass. If it flies away from that product, then the product, it can obviously see that product is, again, creating visual interference by its dots or its squares, and the bird knows that it doesn't want to fly into that, so it flies towards the transparent window. The good news is that you don't have to worry about it, because there's a very soft netting, very fine netting in front of that window, so the birds are never hurt by this test. And that enabled American Bird Conservancy to come up with a whole ranking system to see how effective each of the products are. And that's been very, very helpful in providing some structure to the architects and building owners that want to purchase products that can hopefully ameliorate or eliminate the problem. One of the best strategies is to put glass up that's either frosted or fritted. And what I mean by that is fritted is glass that actually has like a ceramic addition to the glass, or the glass is hollowed out by a little depression. And so you can see in the lower right-hand corner, lower left-hand corner, those dots, which are spaced about, they can be anywhere from every 2 inches to every 2 by 4 inches, depending. You can see that let's take the window in the lower right, really creates, again, I keep using a term, but the visual interference that enables the bird to see the window for what it is. You or I would not walk into that because we could see it, and the birds can see it just as well. If those dots were not there, you could easily see why a bird might fly into that window and of course, succumb to its injuries. So fritted and frosted glass, you can see in the upper right is frosted glass, that it just, again, it breaks the reflection quite significantly well, and that could be really helpful. A really neat technology that's still kind of being developed, but there are some products on the market, one created by a company in Germany called Ornolux, is the fact that many birds, not all, but many birds can actually see ultraviolet. They can see through the ultraviolet range. Us humans cannot. And so if you could put a pigments or pattern in windows between, say, surface 1 and surface 2, you can create that visual interference that the birds can see, but that you or I really can't see, or see very limited. And there have been a number of installations of this UV glass. If you're interested in seeing it, if you know the relatively new Jones Beach Nature and Energy Center that's situated at the west end of Jones Beach, they incorporated UV glass, Ornolux glass, and it's been effective. Its mortality's been reduced. It's still not foolproof because again, some bird species don't see UV, and UV doesn't transmit all times of day. It all depends on the angle of sunlight. So if it's the wrong angle, it's not going to help the bird. So UV is not a foolproof answer, but it's nevertheless part of the mix. A whole nother approach is exterior window film. What I just showed you before that are actually the windows, but for those existing buildings and windows, it's really probably not feasible that you're going to retrofit all the windows in a big building. That could add up quickly to many, many millions of dollars. A much cheaper solution is to put an adhesive exterior window film that has the dots or the lines built in, either horizontal or vertical lines or dots. And there's a couple of companies that manufacture this. One that's fairly well known is called Feather Friendly. That's the fellow that I mentioned about Korea before, and they can be effective. The downside with that is, of course, they don't have the kind of the shelf life that the windows themselves have that'll last many, many decades. The exterior window film is estimated to last about a decade, maybe a little bit longer, again, because it's subject to all the elements. But nevertheless, it is a much cheaper, effective solution to deal with it. Another product that is quite effective is one that you've probably seen called Kaleidoscape. If you've ever sat on, let's say you're in Manhattan and you see a bus go by, and the bus's whole side, or like the Hampton Jitney, it's got this advertisement on the windows. You really can't see the passengers, that are sitting on the seats in the bus, but they can see looking out. That's this product, Kaleidoscape, and that's a very effective product because no bird's going to fly into that opaque window film. It's going to think it's a solid surface. It still does allow you to see out, although I must confess the view is a bit compromised. But for places that are looking out, it's not so important, like certain windows or certain types of establishments, facilities, like at certain nature centers, they've used this. We're not all the windows. Do you want people really looking out? Anyway, they'll put this to provide an effective solution. There's a bunch of other cheaper approaches that just using sticky tape, decals, screens, netting, string. As I mentioned before, Four Harbors Audubon has taken on the many buildings at the South Campus, like where the School of Marine and Atmospheric Science is located, if you've been there ever. Again, one-story buildings, and they again have been a real killing field. So we've put up several thousand stickers, mostly 4-inch by 4-inch, on the outside, just to create, I'll say it yet again, the visual interference that enable the bird to see the windows for what they are. And we're not doing it by every 2 inches by 2 inches because we can't afford that. But a window, even that's 10 by 10 feet, just putting 4 or 5 stickers strategically placed can help the bird discern that there's a window there. And so what they do recommend, this 2x4 rule, that ideally to have the tape or to have the dots be no further apart than 2 inches horizontally and 4 inches typically vertically. Or it could be the other way around. It really doesn't much matter. But what you want to do is you want to just try to really make the spaces small. The rule for hummingbirds is really 2 inches by 2 inches because they'll dart through vegetation. And as you know, if you bird watch, you know that birds like Swainson's thrushes, which are a notorious victim of window strikes, will try to dart through these small areas. So that's why, again, it's ideal to try to have areas on the window that are really not much bigger than 4 inches by 4 inches, without having some type of again, a dot or a square or something to discern it. Another element is, which is not, you really can't do around your house like you can with those decals I mentioned, is just exterior elements. And a lot of companies and architects have been quite innovative in developing an exterior skin to buildings that make them absolutely bird friendly. It's kind of part of this bird friendly building design. So the building in the upper left has got this kind of diagonal metal lattice built in that helps create, again, the interference and the barrier for birds. The New York Times had a problem with birds flying, so they dropped this rather large, um, metal curtain down in front, solving the problem. The wavy lower left-hand corner, the wavy, facade of the building there, um, comes out so far that the sunlight doesn't hit the window and doesn't create the reflectivity. And of course, different color patterns, like in the lower right, can help solve the problem. So those are some solutions. So again, you've got the window products like UV or fritted glass or frosted glass. You've got the exterior window film of different types, like feather friendly or kaleidoscape. You've got the individual decals or string that can hang down. What doesn't really work so much is just one or two window decals or hawk silhouettes you may have seen. I have seen hawk silhouettes, and in fact, I walked the entire campus of Stony Brook University yesterday with the head of facilities because we want to now move to try to make the main campus more friendly for birds. And there's one place where they put up a bunch of hawk silhouettes. It's not the shape of the hawk that's the issue. It's the hawk silhouette that helps break the reflection and allows the bird to see the window. It's really a matter of, more is better. So any visual markers that are just too faded or too far apart, just are not likely going to be effective. Like plastic owls aren't effective, noise isn't effective. You really want to have a product or an approach that really provides a lot of kind of disturbance to the window. Okay. A whole other thing I want to talk about quickly is, the lights out programs. There's a recognition that birds often fly into windows in urban areas. And you can see what happened. Of course, you may remember this in 2017 in Galveston, Texas, where a whole bunch of birds flew into one building. Birds are attracted to light. They can be mesmerized by light. And in fact, because of that, will kind of change their behavior and get entrained in light and come down to these urban areas as they're migrating. And then come morning, they then fly into the windows and of course can die. So there's a whole program, and Audubon has been very active in terms of this Lights Out New York program that try to reduce the amount of ambient light. And that's something, again, you could do around your house, is to be more cognizant of, shutting the lights, your porch lights off, or pulling the blinds so the light that's bleeding out from your living room doesn't help just bathe the sky in this glow that can affect, bird behavior. One of the specific areas where it's been a problem with light with birds is at the 9/11 memorial, where you can see in the two light towers here to really celebrate, or not celebrate, but commemorate, I should say, the tragic events of 9/11. Birds get entrained in those light beams, and each of those dashes, white dashes you see, are birds during the fall migration heading south. And New York City Audubon has an agreement with the sponsors of this event that when the birds reach a certain magnitude, they shut the lights off for a couple of minutes, let the birds then can disperse, and then they turn the lights back on. So lights, again, can be a problem and a contributing factor to this overall issue. The great news, again, is that a lot of municipalities are dealing with this. And most notably, from our perspective, living in the shadow of the Big Apple, is New York City in the fall of 2019 adopted a law that requires any new buildings or significant retrofits of buildings to incorporate bird-friendly building design. So they cannot put up buildings now anymore with just these highly reflective, glass windows or highly transparent windows. They have to be windows that, again, birds can see. that is being followed. That the action by New York City actually was preceded by laws in a lot of other cities throughout the country. Oakland's done it. San Francisco's done it. About a dozen different cities in California have done it. Several in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and so there's real good news. It's really starting to spread, and I can tell you there's talk now. We're looking to get legislation introduced in the state legislature this year to require any new state buildings to incorporate bird-friendly building design. There's a similar federal law that's been introduced by Congressman Quigley out of Illinois, that any new federal buildings would have to incorporate bird-friendly building design if indeed that passes. So people are responding, again, both to in the legislative arena as well as in terms of the technology to be able to, address the problem. The issue, of course, is that the magnitude is so great, and these laws really deal more with, the new buildings come out. What do we do about the millions of existing buildings? That's really tough, and that's where, again, the retrofits of the window film and the decals can come into play. So I'm going to say, almost concluding here, to tell if you're interested in more information, you can go into these different websites and learn a lot more about specifics. The Fatal Lights Awareness Program, of FLAP, is an especially productive website with a lot of information. They were among, and that's out of Toronto, Canada. They were among the first organization to really focus on this issue in a meaningful way. The whole organization's mission is to really try to reduce and eliminate bird strikes, and they've done just yeoman's effort and great work in that regard. And so I want to conclude by saying that this unfortunate poor white person nuthatch that met its demise flying into a patio door window. Let's make this a thing of the past. And I want to throw out a challenge to North Fork Audubon, and that is we've been trying to get each of the chapters, Audubon chapters in the state of New York, to adopt a building or a building complex where there's a known window strike problem. Again, we've adopted a few. The South Campus of again Stony Brook University and Brookhaven Town Hall. If you know Brookhaven Town Hall at all, you know where the auditorium is, where the town board meets, and the cafeteria where people eat. Those windows were terrible, and we put up many hundreds of stickers there. We'd encourage you to. There's got to be buildings within a charter area of North Fork Audubon that are problems, and encourage you to buy some of the decals. And it's a great fun exercise or fun event, and it's a great volunteer event to have people go out and to put up these stickers on those windows. So again, I'd encourage North Fork Audubon to think about doing that for one or more buildings in your in your area. So that's it for the presentation I wanted to give, and would be delighted to try to answer any questions or respond to any comments that anybody has.
So I have a question. So other than, you said the Brookhaven Town Hall, Stony Brook, have you identified any major buildings in Suffolk County that are have a high incidence of strikes? Pardon?
Suffolk Community College. What I have found is that the college campuses are a problem. And so the Selden campus is a problem. The Eastern campus is a problem, but less so. And even the campus in Brentwood, I've found some dead birds. Last week, for example, I was this a little bit off the mark, but I just stressed the college issue. I walked around with the head of facilities at Adelphi University, and they've got a bird strike issue. So just think about universities or colleges and the buildings they often build, a lot of glass skin. Again, it's, this whole movement though, the last 30, 40 years away from, concrete and brick, exterior walls to glass walls has really created such a problem. So yeah, in terms of Suffolk County, the ones that jump to mind is the community college. I know that it's outside your charter area, but the former Southampton College, which is now part of SUNY Stony Brook, the Southampton campus, that also has had a bird strike issue. On at least one of the buildings, because I used to teach ornithology there, and we used to find the dead birds outside the building where I used to teach. So, and I'd have to give some more thought, Gwen. I'm sure there's other buildings that.
Well, I'm
that
thinking
are-
in Southold, I'm wondering if like the hospital or the schools,
The best
places
way,
like that.
schools are a problem. I've met with any number of teachers and walked around the schools. They vary. I mean, some schools, again, depending on where they were built or designed, are less problematic than others. But schools definitely are an issue. Hospitals are an issue. And the best thing to do is to go in, ask for permission, and I would just walk around the exterior and look down again, typically during spring and fall migration, and look to see. If you do that a few times in spring migration and don't find anything, you probably have a building that's not a problem. But I know, like office parks, like along the expressway, some of these office parks, like over in Syosset, are a real problem. The Hauppauge Industrial Park, I know there's some significant buildings that have problems there that we hope to get to. So, yeah, everywhere you look, there's buildings that are problematic for migratory songbirds.
There was a question in the chat. So why do, I just have to scroll down. Why don't the treatments applied to the interior windows work?
Very good question. The reason is that let me say they can work, and they do work. If you put a treatment on the inside, you can deal with the transparency issues, right? Because you're breaking the transparency. So in certain applications, that's why it's really a case-by-case basis. Is it a reflectivity problem or a transparency problem? If it's a transparency problem, putting something on the inside can work. If it's a reflectivity problem, putting something on the inside is not going to be nearly as effective because the reflection is still occurring. You're not breaking the reflection on what we call surface one, which is the exterior surface. And just think about that. If you were to have a highly reflective window and close, let's say you got Venetian blinds and just close those blinds on the inside, it creates a little bit of visual interference. It may help, but you still, if you stay outside, you still, oh my gosh, that's still a highly reflective window. That's a problem. So that's the reason, is that you need, for those windows that are creating reflective problems, you need to break the reflection. So,
It's
and you
funny, I
can't do
have
that
like,
on the inside.
I have a sliding glass doors, and birds were hitting them. So I took tape and I put tape, but I only put it, it's funny, I have plants underneath, but I only put the tape at like maybe, 3 to 5 feet, 6 feet.
Huh?
And so, and I was getting much fewer, but I was still getting them.
Yeah.
So
Well,
maybe they were seeing the plants and the reflection, and I never thought of
Are
that.
the plants on the inside?
Yeah, that's where I put
Yeah,
all my
they-
plants.
Yeah, they see your plants, and they
Yeah.
might be bugs in your plants and yummy, yummy, yummy. Yeah. You can put up, I mean, again, there's some really pretty, my house here, I've had 2 bird strikes in my life with a house. One when I lived in Massapequa, I'll tell you a quick funny story there. And then one just here in Setauket now. And in Setauket, I had a common grackle fly into the window and die. And so there's these very decorative now stickers. And I'm going to contradict myself by saying that there's this new company that actually creates stickers that you put up on the inside, but they reflect UV light through the window. And so they do create an interference to the outside, even though they're on the inside. They're very decorative. They look pretty. So the key is just putting it up enough so you're not going to have any more strikes. What happened in Massapequa was, I remember we're sitting down, I've said this a few times, sitting down to eat dinner, and I remember it was wonderful spaghetti and meatballs dinner, and I'm talking with Georgia, my wife, and all of a sudden the dining room's next to the living room. It's wide open. I could look out the living room picture window across the street. I just happened to look at it as I'm chewing up spaghetti, and I see a blue jay fly across the road and the street, and it's flying across the front lawn, and like, bird, you better divert because you can hit the window. It flew right into the window. Boom, hits the window. So I run out, drop my finish my spaghetti and run outside, and the bird apparently didn't. It glanced off. It was okay. I couldn't find the bird in the flower bed underneath in the shrub bed. So it did affect. So I didn't enjoy my meal as much because of the damn blue jay. But apparently it did survive. But that was kind of a weird story. And so I make the point because almost every house through the course of a year is estimated to have a bird strike, many of which are fatal. And so think of the hundreds of millions or tens of millions or scores of millions of houses that exist in North America. And if it's just every third house has a strike, you think you do the math and numbers quickly really reach proportions that are depressing.
So there's
Anyway.
another question from Diane. So at home, screens on the bottom of the window and decals on the outside of the upper part of the window will work.
Yes.
Do they work? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Screens are very effective because, again, screens create that visual interference. They totally break a reflection. Typically, they break transparency. And so, yeah, screens are wonderful. Another product that's good is it's called Acopian bird savers. That's string. You can see that's a product that's sold online. I forget what length they come in, but they come in, I think it's like 3 feet or 4 feet wide wood. You put it up, and then it's string that hangs every 4 inches apart in front of like a picture window. That is proven to be quite effective. If you don't want to put up, like tape, like I showed before, the distance. So, yeah, screens work. Netting at the South Campus of Stony Brook University. You got, Carl Safina, good old Carl. I'd work with Carl there. In fact, we had the meeting yesterday again with the campus. Carl was so dismayed by the impact on one side of the buildings that they put up netting along the entire stretch. Quite effective. There's never been a bird strike since. And this was a side of I think it was Challenger Hall, where they were having upwards of a dozen dead birds a year flying into the windows. Well, that's gone. They've solved that. So netting can be definitely effective. Screens can be effective. String can be effective. Decals can be effective. Window film. Windows, again. We're going to reach the point, we hope that any new windows manufactured, even for homes, will incorporate bird-friendly building design. Probably most notably incorporating UV pigments, because people are going to complain if you had fritted glass windows. You don't want a picture window when you got a really nice house. You're looking out over the water and you got, you see these dots. So it'll probably have to be UV developed windows that are effective with birds, but still enable you to, doesn't compromise the view you have.
So Diane also said, also a cat sitting inside the sliding glass door works. So
that's fine. Yeah. The key is inside. Yes. Keep Diane does. Diane's got wonderful cats. We love Diane's cats.
Yeah.
Just like we love Diane. Yes.
Does anybody have any other questions or? I don't see any other questions. I just, I think this is such an important topic. So we have a newsletter coming out this spring, so we'll do a piece about it, and we'll try to see if we can get adopting a building. We should try to find one in Southold, and migration's coming up. So I always think of the hospital. Like that's right on the water.
I'm sure Peggy's got a few buildings in mind.
I'm trying to think. I mean, the hospital comes to mind. I can't.
Yeah, I wonder about the hospital. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how far. Did you go through? You cover all the Riverhead too, right?
No.
No.
That's Elias.
Yeah.
Oh, they come up to the North Shore?
And Shelter Island.
Oh, okay. So are you just Southold
and Shelter Island?
Shelter Island. Okay. Trying to think. I'll certainly give more thought to it if I know of any. But yeah.
I mean, and maybe people, we should write just like a little blurb in an email. Maybe people know and they've noticed, or people that work at a school or work at at the hospital, they may notice as well. So that might be something to do.
I bet you schools. I know schools are problems. Again, another project I did was a school back in Manhasset where we put up several hundred stickers. Where it's been a problem. just by their nature, the way schools are built with, some have really big, extensive windows. So,
Oh, yeah. So Georgiana Gregg said, thank you for an excellent program. And Diane said, and so that just popped out, but I'm wondering whether blue painter's tape would work. That's what I make my stripes out of.
yeah, painter's tape works. In fact, some, again, it's something else. It's just tempera paint. I don't know if you want to, people do that in certain cases. I know like at nature centers to do a tempera paint design. That's quite effective, of course, that because you're destroying both the transparency and reflectivity by, the problem is you can't really see out though. So, kind
But
of.
I remember my boss, who's a farmer, telling me that he watched a hawk. He has deer fencing around his farm, and he said he just watched the hawk, just like, and it can't be more than like 4x4, maybe. And he just stealthily like threw right through. So it's like,
The
yeah.
Sippers can do that. Yeah, the smaller hawk. Yeah, like Coopers or Sharpshin. Yeah, because as you know, they're forest hawks, and they pursue their prey. It might be a Swainson's thrush, right through the forest understory. And so those species that do that are often window strike victims because they think they're going through these little crevices, and it's crazy.
So Ann Sandy says, thank you. And I guess if no one else, does anybody else have any questions or? I guess not. And I did put information about our upcoming programs in the chat. So I'll just take a moment, especially the shorebird monitoring training. Here's one new message. We really need volunteers to help with that. Great info, John. Thanks, from Diane. So,
Thank you.
well, if nobody has anything else, thank you very much. Yay.
Okay.
We're lucky to have John Turner on Long Island. He's done a lot for the environment, and I forgot to mention he's also part of the Preserve Plum Island Coalition, and it's actually their spokesperson. So he's from east to western Suffolk.
Yeah,
All kinds of stuff.
Spread too thin. But we're going to be successful, I think, with Plum Island. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys know.
Yeah.
Just one quick question.
Oh, sure.
You're talking about local buildings. It seems to me the county center in Riverhead is all glass. The surrogates court, the county jail, a few other things. They're pretty shiny.
Yeah, I walked around where the legislature meets. I walked around that building, and I've only walked around it once. I didn't find any birds. I've not got permission to walk around the jail. I'm not sure I want to. Yeah, I don't know if there's other buildings that you mentioned, something else, but yeah, I mean, if Gwen, you go to that building. You go to that building regularly, don't you?
Well, not so much anymore because it's not COVID friendly, but
okay.
But yeah, we have occasion, but I mean, I work right near there, so I could actually, during May, just walk around, see what I see,
I would be surprised if there is any, again, I would draw a conclusion based on, one person walk around one time, that there's not a problem. So it'd be great if you would actually walk and take a look.
Yeah, like maybe a couple of times a week or something, and
yeah,
and our the Cornell building, I've never seen a bird in the parking lot, but I don't really look in the.
And what happens also, to say again at the belated point, even if it's reflective, a lot of windows now, and I saw this again on the main campus at Stony Brook as well as at Adelphi, they've got a pigment, they've got like a shade built in. So even though it's reflective, it's much darker. That's not going to be an issue for the bird because it's breaking up the reflection and it's totally destroying the transparency. So I think I've seen that at the Cornell, where your office is. I stand to be corrected, but I think the windows there are tinted, aren't they?
They may be. It's like because I'm looking out, right? So it's they're very thick. I know that because it's a LEED certified building. And we can't open the windows.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good thing if they are tinted. That certainly helps, and that's a desirable trait.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep our eyes peeled. Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you. Okay.
Well, so I hope we all see you next month on the 14th for Diane Taggart's presentation on warblers, and please visit our website at northforkaudubon.org. And most of our programs will be listed there tonight, if not in the next couple of days for April.
Right.
So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Everyone,
Good night.
Right.
good night.
Good night.